I mean, the tragedy has been that a concept that, if it was properly resourced, could have empowered individuals in terms of the income that they have if they're dependent on support, has actually turned into be a toxic mix where local associations and housing associations don't have the resources coming in for their tenants. Individuals are finding themselves in debt, and the tragedy in one of the most advanced economies in the world with the greatest prosperity in the top 5 or 6 countries of the world were having people present themselves to food banks because of the tragedy that's been incurred because of universal credit. Our commitment is to scrap universal credit, to address some of the very technical difficulties within universal credit, which is essentially the whole concept from get-go that was always problematic, which is the idea that everybody could utilise the digital world to try and access their benefits. That's clearly not been the case. We need a radical shift in how we support people through the benefit structure and the support mechanisms that they require. Again, housing associations have led the way. They've, from their own resources over the years, funded welfare rights officers, support programmes, working with tenants, early intervention strategies. I mean, you know all this as the housing associations. You've intervened at an early level, because even when you recognise that people can't meet their obligations, it's a failure of you and your system and the system itself if someone finds they can't make the contribution and make sure the rest of your tenants aren't having to pick up that overall tab. But you've already gone into debt. You're already over your limit in housing associations right across Glasgow, never mind other parts of Scotland. So we would change that system quite dramatically and try and work away. It's very complex. I'm not going to kid on that reforming the social security system. There are ministers who have died in that ditch. Well, one of them did say he would die in a ditch over Europe. He's not quite died in that ditch yet, right? But the truth of the matter is, that's a fiendishly complex thing that requires a lot of hard work. I'm not going to kid on that it's easy, but an incoming Labour government recognises it's been a failure of policy. We need a dramatic shift in that policy, and we will commit to working with agencies, associations and others to find a much better way to provide support to folk who find themselves very, very vulnerable. And there's nothing more dispiriting or disheartening or heartbreaking than watching families and people who are trying to look after their families feel it's such a loss that they can't meet their obligations. There is a proud tradition in Glasgow that people pay their way. People believe you should put a contribution in. They don't want to be shysters. They don't want to be work shy. They don't want to be whatever words Boris Johnson's written about in the past and then try to disclaim his ownership of in the present. The truth of the matter is, people in this city need the support, and universal credit has to go.
Thanks. So on this issue, I was a child who was brought up with 2 parents who were addicted to drugs when I was younger. So the background that I have is actually seeing the previous benefit system firsthand that was presided over by Frank's party. The whole idea of universal credit was to try and make this a lot more simpler and to try and bring all the benefits into one and make sure that it would work. Now, I fully accept that there has been some mistakes in the way in which it was rolled out. So that's why I called out in 2016 when I was a candidate that the money that George Osborne took out was the wrong decision to make, and actually we do need more funding put into universal credit. And if I was elected on Thursday or Friday, it would be Friday morning, then you can bet that I would be down in Westminster calling for more money to get put into universal credit and into welfare reform, because I still believe that it is the best system possible to make sure that we can move forward. The other thing that I think we need to try and do is find a solution for the 5-week wait. I do think that is far too long for people to be getting their money. You can get it in advance, but I still think that causes huge issues. So what I would like to see is a reduction of that 5-week wait. I'm not going to sit here and come up with policy in the cuff, but it's not my way. If I was elected, I'd want to work with civil servants and ministers to find a solution that I think would be feasible. I listened with great intent to Frank, and it's very easy to sit in opposition and to toss stones. Frank said himself that trying to reform the benefit system is very complex. So Labour's pledge to end universal credit on day one, as Kate Watson said at the Easter House Hustings last week, is just not feasible. You can't have this solution where you're going to say, I'm going to scrap universal credit, but not say what it is I'm going to replace it with. And just putting words like feather and better in front of the word benefit doesn't mean that actually it's going to work. What you need is a proper solution to this. I would like to see more funding go into universal credit where we can make sure that this policy actually works, rather than just scrapping it and trying to go for cheap political soundbites during an election time. You need to remember as well, the Labour Party was in favour of universal credit.
Okay. So I'm actually on universal credit at the moment. I've been unemployed for 4 years now, so I know what it feels like to have been forced into poverty by the system. Whether or not it's a good system, however it was implemented or whatever the ideals were, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but I will agree with both the previous speakers, it's been massively underfunded. The Greens would scrap universal credit. This, as has already been said, would be a difficult thing to actually implement, and it wouldn't be something that you would want to do immediately. But what you would first have to do is make sure that it was the first thing that you would have to do is restore all of the benefits cuts that were implemented under austerity. In April 2020, the benefits cap is going to be listed. We were going to make sure that that's actually going to happen. Sorry, lifted. Also, one of the reasons that I'm actually in poverty at the moment is because there's a rent cap. I'm a private renter. I have to take £200 out of my rent every month to actually make up the shortfall in my universal credit. So what the Greens would look for in the end is that we're in favour of a universal basic services system, which would be things like funded housing and also education, transport, doing things like the Green New Deal aims to reduce fuel poverty and the amount of money that people are actually having to spend out of the money they're given in their benefits. Public transport would be free for under 21s and for retired people, and eventually, hopefully, free altogether. That would be the universal basic services, and we would then look to implement universal basic income, which has worked in various places, including Alaska, so that people actually have an income that wouldn't mean that they're dependent on on employers for dignity of life. And also what we would do is the Green New Deal expects to implement changes in the economy that would bring in 200,000 new jobs in manufacturing, but also wider in the country, in rural areas, in highlands and islands. So people would actually have decent jobs to go to so that they wouldn't actually be depending on benefits. So retirees, carers, all of those people would have the universal basic income, actually meaning that they don't depend on means-tested benefits. And the people who don't want to be depending on benefits would have decent jobs to go to.
Now, I'm also, before I became a politician, was myself claiming housing benefit. And in fact, I was in arrears for a number of years. And it's one of the things I had to pay off before I was able to vote in my first budget in 2018. So this is something I feel personally. I was very lucky to not have to be dealing with the system as it is. It's pretty clear to me that SNP MPs have led the way in fighting against the most deleterious effects of the universal credit. Everybody knows that universal credit is the main driver for poverty, for the massive increase in food banks, and I don't need to tell you how it's affected the rent arrears position. So we know that that's the primary cause. It's poverty, both in work and on the way that the universal credit was introduced, on the back of a massive reduction for its funding. It wasn't funded properly. So SNP MPs have actually managed, with other colleagues from other parties, to force a further £1 billion being put into the universal credit. Not nearly enough, but at least it's £1 billion more if the opposition parties hadn't pushed their way forward on that. We've also it is difficult to replace such a system, and we're not saying we're going to replace it, but we are going to demand a wider benefit take-up campaign so that more people in the UK, we feel that many people should be claiming and are not. We want to end to the benefit sanctions regime, so we will vote to stop that. We will also vote to abolish the bedroom tax and that period of uplift, the 5-week wait. We want to get rid of that too. We also want to abolish the rape clause and the 2-child cap and everything around universal credit that makes it most reactionary. I would say that in principle it was an understandable aim to want to simplify the system and make it much easier to apply and therefore get it, but all the time the motive behind this was austerity, to cut the amount of money spent on welfare, and that's what it's delivered. It's delivered the record numbers of food parcels being put out, and any welfare system that does that, it shows that it's morally bankrupt. And we've tried in the beginnings of the Scottish benefit system we've set up to established the principles of respect and dignity, that claimants are treated with respect. We've had, I think it's 91,000 people have been helped with £190 million in vital financial support. That's what we've done already in just a couple of years. Imagine what we'd have with all the full powers of independence if we could set up a decent, honourable, humane benefit system. We have to try to create the alternative in the here and now when universal credit does go, and I'm sure it will.
So I'm going to echo what some of the comments have been here, that it is extremely difficult to replace an existing system. We've just been through a massive period where people have been moving from one side of the benefit system to the other one, and throughout that transition period that's been extremely rocky, extremely bumpy, and people have had an extremely bad time on this. So what the Liberal Democrat policy is going to be to reform universal credit beyond its current reckonings. We would replace universal credit sanctions with incentives. We will increase the number of houses that are available for social rent, not just affordable, but you are able to genuinely afford them with the universal credit payments that you will receive. We will absolutely reduce the 5-week wait. 5-week wait. We think it's absolutely terrible. There's a 5-week wait for universal credit. People can't just wait that long to get money to live on, and that is essentially one of the factors that drives people into homelessness. Other things that we will do, we will abolish the bedroom tax, we will abolish the work capability assessment with real-world tests, and we will replace universal basic income with an unconditional payment.